So the purpose of this video is to show you that even in a yard as infested as this one is, with ivy on the ground, ivy climbing all the trees, that with the right knowledge and a few simple tools, that it is easy and inexpensive to restore nature and get rid of all this ivy. Now I'm sure the original homeowner, 20, 30, maybe even 40 years ago, when they went to the local nursery, bought a few sprigs of ivy, maybe to have it as a ground cover or to decorate a retaining wall. I'll bet they had no idea, of course they had no idea, that it would cover the ground so completely, that it would climb all the trees, that it would get into their neighbors' yards, that the birds, those few birds, native birds, that eat ivy fruit would spread it to yards many miles from here. So now, these years later, we can see what some of the non-native ornamentals we brought into our yard look like once English ivy gets out of England. So the question is, where do we start? Well, the best place to start is to get it off the trees. I think there's a good one behind me we picked out that has an awful lot of vines on it. But you give me 5 minutes and a few cutting tools, and we can get that ivy separated from its life support. Okay, so we start with the trees primarily because once the ivy gets airborne, gets up into the trees, it sends out branches where it fruits. It flowers and then it fruits, and those very few birds that will eat English ivy eat those seeds and spread them, and we don't want it spread, so we're going to start with the trees. The tools you need, well, first you need to take care of yourself. Got a long sleeve shirt, long pants, boots, good work gloves, and 3 simple tools, many of which I bet you already have. Pruning shears, lopping shears, in case I come across something really big, a pruning saw. Sometimes you even need a crowbar for really big vines, but I don't think we have that on this tree. So, I think I'll start with, I think I can do it all with these smaller shears. You start as close to the ground as you're comfortable to. You have to go flat to the bottom and just pick some vines. You cut them, but we want to pull them off up to a foot or 2 feet, something like that, just enough so that you expose a section of trunk. And the only reason for exposing that section of trunk is to make sure you got them all. I mean, if you just cut them and then didn't, we're not going to pull them all the way off the tree. We're just going to pull this band so we can see, yep, pine like this, they'll hide under the bark. Oh, look here. Look at this. We've got more than ivy on this tree. We've got another hated invasive to get rid of, pretty much the way you get rid of ivy. Look at this. Look at that. Get a close-up of that big vine wrapping this whole thing. That is wisteria. And it really will choke the tree. But we're not doing wisteria today, we're doing ivy. And that's it. Cutting that band away shows me I got everything. So there's still those vines up on the tree, but don't try to pull them off. You might well hurt the bark as you do so, and you might also pull branch that the ivy had killed on your head. You don't want that. It will take a little while for the vines to die. Leaves will drop off first. It'll be a month or two. I mean, actually, the ivy can still get a little sustenance from moisture in the air. Wait a minute, there's one just to make sure. So be patient. Kind of looked like hell for a month or so, but by and by it just all drops off and serves to fertilize the tree it was trying to kill. So that's about all there is to it. Now I guess I need to tell you how to get rid of the ivy on the ground. So a yard covered with ivy like this one is a more productive breeding ground for mosquitoes in the Great Dismal Swamp. So if you don't like mosquitoes, you don't like ivy. You get rid of your ivy, you can get rid of mosquitoes too. Save the trees and the ground while you're at it. So how do you get the ivy off the ground, particularly when there's this much? Well, if you have a smaller amount, you can just pull it up. It's not that hard to do. You do want to tug up gently and get all the roots out of the ground. So it's probably smart to start a day after a rain so the ground is softer. And it's really good organic material. If you can pile it up somewhere where it can just rot down, that's better than bagging it and letting the garbage man take it away. But wherever you put it, you don't let those roots touch the ground, or it may, not always, but it may just re-sprout. All right, so pulling it up works for a small area. What about an area this big? I mean, I can see how it would be easy to become defeated and think you can never get it all up, because you're looking at weeks, months, maybe even years, depending on how eager you are to actually pull up this much ivy. So what are the alternatives? Well, a very charming alternative is to get goats. Goats will come in and eat all the ivy. They eat everything else first. I think the ivy is kind of their least favorite thing to eat, but once they've chewed everything else up they can get to, they'll get rid of the ivy. But they'll just eat the top part. They won't eat the roots, and it's just going to grow back. In which case you can pay to have the goats come back and eat everything again, but that tends to get expensive. So is there a better way? Well, now we're talking about sprays that will kill the ivy. And I know anytime you talk about a spray, a herbicide, quite properly, anybody should be concerned about its effect on the environment. So people will turn to a natural alternative, something like vinegar or Epsom salts. And vinegar will kill the leaves on top. Doesn't get down to kill the roots though, so it will re-sprout. Plus it soaks into the soil, where it will kill the moth larvae that birds in the spring rely on to feed their young. It'll kill the earthworms and the nematodes that are important to keep the soil healthy. Plus the fact if you use any concentration of vinegar greater than 5%, it's a danger to your skin and eyes. So it's not a good choice. Well, what about Epsom salts? Well, Epsom salts are salt. And I think in ancient times, enemy armies would salt the crops of their enemies in order to make sure they could never grow anything there. So that's not something you want to do in your yard. So is there a better way? And actually this is where we need to turn to herbicides. Again, something you need to be very careful with, and I don't blame you for being concerned about which of all those herbicides can we possibly expect to get rid of the ivy with and to bring nature back. Many of them linger in the soil for months, even years. Some of them are a danger to ourselves, to our children, to our pets. So we want to be careful what herbicide we choose. And the one I recommend is glyphosate. I would expect glyphosate immediately raises red flags. It was developed by Monsanto years ago. Luckily, it's off patent, so you don't have to buy it from evil Monsanto. but many people have been awarded millions of dollars because they think that it caused their cancer. It's actually listed by the World Health Organization as a 2A probable human carcinogen. Oddly, that same list includes coffee and red meat, so I wouldn't suggest a hot cup of glyphosate with your morning eggs, but we still need to be very careful with it. And Monsanto has developed what they call a Roundup Ready seed for farmers to plant, tying them in to the constant cycle of having to use these Monsanto seeds. And this is why traces of it end up in your children's breakfast cereals. But that's not how we're going to use it. Its careless use by farmers and maintenance crews are responsible for the death of many plants that our pollinators, like the monarch butterfly, need to rely on. So how are we going to approach this dangerous chemical? I tend to view it the way you would deadly botulism. If you ingest that at a church supper or get a little bit into a scraped knee, it will make you very sick or worse. But doctors can use that same organism to still the tremors of Parkinson's disease. Inject a little bit of it under your skin and it can improve your facial landscape. So that's how we are going to use glyphosate, in tiny amounts, carefully applied. So do know when you spray it that when it hits the ground, it is immediately bound by the soil where it becomes inert. So you don't have to worry about it washing into streams or polluting the groundwater. You do, however, want to be careful not to spray it in standing water or in a flowing stream, because there are some surfactants, soaps really, that are mixed into it that will affect the mucus coating on fish, aquatic insects. So if you're close to any water like that, just avoid that area. Do pull up the ivy by hand in those places. You also don't need to weed whack or mow. That's just an extra waste of energy. Properly applied, the glyphosate will completely take care of ivy and bring nature back. You want to spray it in late summer all the way through winter if you live in mild winters, to just the very end of winter if you've got days above 60 degrees. Because the way glyphosate operates is it actually the plant takes it into its roots, where it kills the whole plant, leaving it laying on the soil to decompose and enrich the ground. In the spring, March, April really, the process in the plant is to take the stored energy from the previous year up from the roots to make leaves. But starting mid-June, July on, now that energy is coming from the leaves and going back into the roots, and it takes the glyphosate with it and takes care of the plant entirely. So let me show you how we can go to mix up some glyphosate and protect both ourselves and to protect nature while we do it. These are the only tools you'll need. First, of course, you need the concentrate. This is a 2.5 gallon container, but it also comes in 1 gallon and half gallon. You can expect a 1 gallon container of the concentrate to cover 3 to 4 acres of ivy, so that might be all you'll need. Typically the label says 41%, it might say 53%, but that doesn't really affect the dilution rate, because for ivy we're going to make 8 ounces of the glyphosate and mix it with 1 gallon of water. So the other thing you'll need will be just a cheap plastic mixing cup, of course. I use a surfactant. This is meant for use with the herbicide, so I feel most comfortable using that, but many people have used just dish soap, and that does very well. I also put in a little bit of dye, once again meant for this purpose, but you really don't need to. It just helps me see where I've sprayed. So let's go ahead and mix a little glyphosate up. All right, now it's just a matter of measuring and pouring. I've got a 3-gallon pump-up sprayer. I'm just going to use 2 gallons. So at 8 ounces to the gallon, that means I'm going to put in 16 ounces of the glyphosate to there. Cap that off. Don't lose it. And I'm going to add 2 ounces of this surfactant, although really you guys could just use dishwashing liquid. I think it works just as well. I like to be a little bit safe. Up to the 2 ounce level. All right. And then the dye, which again isn't that necessary, but it helps a little. Just a splash. A little bit goes a long way. Actually, if you use the dye, you might be happy to wear one of those Tyvek suits you can get at Home Depot, because it will turn your clothes blue if it gets on there. All right. Now we're doing this on bare ground, and it's important you do it that way, because if you spill anything, as soon as the herbicide, and you will spill a little bit, hits the ground, it binds with the soil and becomes chemically inert. So you don't have to worry about polluting the environment, because it gets inert, it won't wash into the, I'm going to add the water. I've got the hose turned down slow so it won't mix too violently, but it does come out of the hose really quick at the beginning. So I'm going to get the pressure off, and then take a little while. I want to get every ounce of sweet goodness out of that glyphosate. Now, put it up to 2 gallons. I guess the bottom of the 2 is probably indicates 2 gallons. Close enough. Get it off. Out of the way. This. Really tight. Sure the pressure relief is closed. I think it is. Pump it up. Do it. Now, just need to shake it up a little bit, get everything mixed in there. And now we are ready to go make some mosquitoes homeless and return a yard to nature. I'm ready to go. I've carefully mixed up 16 ounces of the concentrate, 2 ounces of the surfactant, the soap. I've put in a splash of that blue dye, added enough water to make up 2 gallons, shook it up real good, pumped up the sprayer. I've got myself ready. I've got rubber boots on, long pants, long sleeve shirt, rubber gloves, eye protection, and I've got the most important protection against a dangerous carcinogen, the sun. If you want to be even more careful, you could probably get a Tyvek suit from Home Depot or Lowe's for 15 or 20 bucks. Really nothing more to do now than to go kill some devil weeds while you're thinking about how mosquitoes will have to go find another place to go lay their eggs. Let's go. Okay, you want to spray carefully. You want to thoroughly wet the vines, but you don't want to overdo it. Now I notice Here I'm very close to a spider wart. It's a lovely plant, and I don't want to kill it, so I'm going to avoid it carefully. You only fix what you don't know, or you're only spraying ivy. Now, all right, here, that's a little bit of wisteria, which should go, but it's so close to the spider wart, we'll get it later. And I go, oh look here, this right there, it's a native muscadine. I don't want to hit that, so I'm going to carefully spray around it. And then here's another something. I don't know what that is, but I only want to kill ivy, so I'm not going to get close to it. So again, don't overdo it, but do wet the leaves. You should spray if you know there's not going to be rain within 2 hours, because the rain will just wash it off, and you'll have to do it again. But don't worry about polluting the groundwater, because as soon as that concentrate hits the soil, it will. Oops, there's a little more of the muscadine I don't want to get. But as soon as that concentrate hits the soil, it becomes inert, binds with the soil, and won't wash into streams or pollute the groundwater. You can spray it till it's all done. Oh good, there's another spider wart. Don't hit that boy. I will be happy to see those take over. Oops. Oh, I see just a little bit of Virginia creeper. Yeah, Virginia creeper will be glad to get this ivy going. Well, that was easy, wasn't it? We've sprayed the bad, protected the good. In another month or so, you should have just a thick brown carpet of decaying leaves ready to fertilize whatever else you might want to plant in now this open area. And don't be surprised if nature has its own opinions about what to do. Come next fall, you might find that you're enjoying the butterflies over the Joe Pye weed and the hummingbirds hovering around a cardinal flower. Now that you do realize that you probably missed a few spots, and so when everything does turn brown, you'll see those places where you missed the ivy. Just keep that pump sprayer handy, and you can go and hit those odd spots. Maybe some other invasives have taken advantage of the open ground, and you've got Elaeagnus or privet or wisteria, something like that. You can, just in a few minutes in the upcoming months and in the years to follow, it'll take 10-15 minutes a year just to take care of those tiny invasives or weeds that you don't want that come in. Since now you know what you're doing, your house probably isn't the only one whose yard is covered in ivy. So help your neighbors with their ivy problem. Maybe you all can get together to take care of common areas where ivy's overgrown behind a fence or next to the swimming pool. And you probably also have neighbors who have an ivy problem but aren't able to take care of it. So get together and help those also. Together we can get rid of this scourge of ivy. I do want you to go to our website, turftotrees.org. There's a lot more information there besides just information about how to get rid of ivy, lists of native trees and plants that will take almost no maintenance on your part to make your yard beautiful. So go ahead, kill that ivy. Thank you.